Welcome to the Write Good Books podcast, the audio companion to WriteGoodBooks.com, with your host Jason Bougger.
And we're back for another episode of the Write Good Books podcast. I'm Jason. I'm joined again by our co-host Scott Michael Childers. And how are you on this fine day?
I am here in the present.
Yes, because we're going to talk about tense today. Last time we talked about point of view, sort of, and it's prompted by a user question, and just by chance, maybe by fate, we had another reader question ask us about tense from listener Justin. Hi, Justin, out there. Just our opinion when writing a book. Is it better to write in past or present tense? And then he gives some examples. I thought it'd be good to talk about this because it goes well with our point of view topic from last week. And I'm also kind of opinionated in it that I am not a big fan of present tense.
You have an opinion?
At all.
Oh my gosh.
Sometimes. But real quick, should we just kind of go over it?
Yeah.
Here I am. You're writing in the past tense, so you'll say, I ran down the street.
They said, he said,
he said,
etc., etc.
Yeah, present tense, it's I say, he says, she says,
yeah.
Blah, blah. Okay.
I run, I gather.
Yeah.
I run into the wall and fall down.
Yeah.
You know, it's all here and now.
Jason looks over you and laughs and kicks you while you're down.
We're actually narrating what's going on right now.
Yeah, it's kind of fun. I'm grabbing the chair. So I kind of just responded to the reader saying, or listener saying, it's up to you and how your story works, and that's about the best answer I have on that. When, in your opinion, Scott, does present tense work?
For me, present tense works well, like we talked about at the end of our last podcast, when you're hiding stuff and you are revealing things as they happen.
Okay.
It creates this, it's an emotional tension type of thing if you're using present tense as opposed to past.
Yeah.
Past, especially first person, suggests someone survives whatever ordeal so they can relay the story, right? Third person, it's not quite as relevant, I think.
Yeah.
But yeah, present.
I think it is good to... You can have a little more action-oriented story in the present. You can make the reader feel like they're watching it live instead of being told a story. Like I said, I prefer past tense, but I think the risk of info dump is higher in past tense.
Yeah.
Or the risk of telling, maybe.
Yeah, it's certainly putting stuff where it doesn't belong, because you could get used to, well, I can say anything because I have that point of view from this is all that matters, I guess.
It's a lot easier to just start throwing in a whole bunch of backstory in the past tense, too, where in the present... In the present, you are going to stay more focused on what's happening at that moment in the story.
Well, hopefully, if you're writing that way, yes.
Yeah, that's true.
But yeah, I think there's one thing with present and past. There are some people who are certainly opinionated about how they read their fiction. Just earlier today, when I knew we were going to talk about this topic, you know, I was doing a little bit of digging, and there are some readers that if they see the book is in present tense, they won't read. It goes back on the shelf.
Yeah, I read a lot of books to my kids, and if it's in present tense, as I read it out loud, I translate it to past. It just feels so awkward reading present tense.
There we go.
So,
case in point.
I'm one of those.
However, some of the biggest things in YA, Hunger Games, it's written in present tense.
The only one I read was Fat Kid Rules the World. That was first person present, and I just thought I would have enjoyed it so much more had it been past tense.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's all your taste.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing.
Hunger Games. See, I haven't read Hunger Games. Confession time. It's in the present tense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
At least what I remember it being. Here's the thing, and going back to that question is, how do we feel about it? Me personally, it's there's pros and cons to both, but to be honest, those pros and cons are slight in either direction for me. Now, you as a reader are actively translating present tense to past tense when you read aloud to your kids. You might have a stronger feeling than I do.
Well, maybe, but reading out loud, and even reading a book to myself, I do that. When I read short stories for Theme of Absence, I'll do that.
Really?
I can't read. But what's funny is I have at least, I don't know, 1 or 2 published short stories in the present tense, so we all break our own rules.
Yeah. Now, there used to be kind of this unwritten rule that literature was written in the past tense.
Yeah.
And the present tense in fiction is, this resurgence of present tense in fiction is relatively new compared to the hundreds of years of literature we have. So I think that might be where part of this reluctance on tense is, because it is a relatively new thing. However, like All Quiet on the Western Front, right? Classic novel, that's present tense.
I read that 25 years ago, I think.
Yeah, see.
I don't remember.
So there's a lot of people say literature is written in past tense. However, there are exceptions. So I guess we're coming at it from readers at this point.
Sure.
What about from writers?
From writers. Well, it's easier for me to write in the past tense because that's what I'm used to.
Okay.
I guess I've done one little trick where I had one story, it was all past tense, and then something drastic happened, and the last final chapter switched to present. So I've done little tricks like that, I guess, but I find it so distracting to read in the present tense that it's hard for me to write that way.
Okay.
Have you done it?
Yeah, I've written in present tense, but I also focus on history, right? Historical fiction, nonfiction. That's nonfiction history books. I'm going to be talking about past tense, right? This happened because in that case it's more authoritative. I'm not in a lot of the nonfiction, unless it's narrative nonfiction. I don't know if we've talked about that genre yet or not, but if you're writing nonfiction, you're going to write past tense usually, unless it's that narrative style. Now, historical fiction, you could get away with writing present tense if you're also doing like first person.
Yeah.
Right? If you're doing third person present tense, that's a weird kind of combination for many folks. You can make it work. The execution would, it would take a little bit more thought in the execution of it. So
So I wonder, I'm going to ask a question instead of throwing out my random answers, but I wonder when writing in tense, I've never sat down before I started a story and said, this is going to be third person past tense because that's the way it is. I wonder, do you sit down and say, I'm going to try this in the present tense and see how it sounds?
Have I tried that?
Yeah.
Yes.
Is that...
When I'm not writing the fiction stuff, I tend to just start writing and see what tense and point of view kind of happens in the first little bit. I don't go too far. There are horror stories of people getting halfway through their novel and then deciding to change tenses.
Yeah.
But exploring a little bit. And again, I'm not an outliner. I do a little bit of outlining, so I hit beat points, but most of the writing is done in an exploratory way. And for me, that's also exploring point of view and tense. What seems to fit this thing that I'm trying to craft. That's my approach. I tend not to, except for, again, nonfiction, historical, and historical fiction tends to be past just by the nature of what it is, history, right? But when I'm doing my sci-fi stuff, I'm going to start typing and see what tense,
see what comes out,
and point of view happens.
Yeah.
So
I guess one thing I do is, if I'm starting a larger project, I might think, it's a similar language to this book. So I might just kind of use that book. If I'm writing young adult, I happen to be reading a John Green book, I might feel like I'm in that kind of style. And not that I'm stealing ideas or anything like that. I just, I have the bad habit of, if I usually write in the genre that I'm reading at that moment.
You're immersed in it, right?
Yeah.
It's hard to escape that.
Yeah.
Just as long as you're not rewriting their novels.
Yeah. Maybe that's why I'm having a little bit of trouble writing lately, because I'm reading crazy stuff now.
Well, you should be writing crazy stuff. And in that case, the tense could be crazy too.
Crazy, but we write to escape reality. There's too much craziness around us.
So, do you think we answered the original question?
I think, well, kind of. Do what you think is right.
Yeah, and like I said, there are people out there that will give you a hard and fast, it's got to be past tense. Jason right here said it at the beginning of the episode.
Yeah.
There's others like me. They're a little bit more open-minded.
Yeah. Well, some things just would not work. Like, could you imagine... Oh, maybe you could. I was going to say, could you imagine, 2001 in the present tense? But...
Yeah.
So, I don't...
This is... Okay. This is an answer that I think we've thrown around a lot for these type of questions. And forgive me if it sounds cynical, but the real answer is it depends.
Yeah.
Your execution is what's going to make the difference, not exactly your selection.
Yeah.
There are certain selections that might be easier, especially if you have a strength or preference or experience in one of those. But this tense is going to be one of those where, like I said, the pros and cons of that choice, fairly innocuous choice. It depends how you execute it more than your choice, in my opinion.
Yeah. It's really... Try a few things and do what feels the most natural. Because that's more important. It's more important to get those words out, and if it feels natural, it's going to be easier. It'll feel more authentic to a reader than if you're forcing yourself to write in past tense when in your head it's a present tense story.
Yeah. So
I'll still translate it to past tense when I read it.
I'm waiting for the Jason Bougger cut of Theme of Absence, where all the present tense stories gets edited to past tense.
I think I turned those down.
Oh, well,
No, okay, I don't just outright turn down. I do. There have been stories I rejected because they were second person, though, and I just said.
Well, was it
Really?
because of second person, or because the execution was flawed?
Well, maybe this goes back to last week, but I really just don't like second person. No, you're right. If it's really good second person, it shouldn't be too distracting.
Speaking of distracting, we just had a beep. Forgive us. So, since we're talking craziness, right?
Yeah.
Future tense.
Future tense. Is that, has that been done? Like, in the mainstream?
I'm sure it has. I just don't recall reading anything
Yeah.
that was in future tense. That's got to be one of those that you've got to have a crazy amount of skill.
Yeah. Or drugs.
Or both.
So, I can't even think of an example. I will ride the rocket ship, and then you will come. Well, now we're throwing in second person future tense.
Second person future tense, you will write a story in second person future tense, and you will submit it to Theme of Absence.
There you go.
And you will use the subject line, Scott demands this gets published.
You will see Jason's head explode. That would be a good writing challenge, though. Try to write a future tense flash piece and see how it sounds.
Yeah. And we didn't even get into, you write the piece and you send it to Jason and Jason publishes it. That would be closer to a second person future tense story.
I wonder, is that about it? There's past, present, future. There's other weird tenses, aren't there? Like past particle or something like that.
You're talking about like grammar.
Grammar.
Yeah. As far
We keep things basic here.
No, I think that's it. And the real decision for many is is past or present. Future is if you really want to experiment with stuff or you think you can pull it off. I don't want to discourage people from trying it, but you will probably have to do really well if it's going to be accepted. Because it's so far out of the norm.
It could be fun, though.
Oh, yeah.
We probably rambled on enough for everybody.
Yeah, it's time for us to put this episode in past tense.
Yeah. So if you've got any questions you'd like us to discuss on the air, we may or may not answer them, but we would certainly discuss them. You can contact us on writegoodbooks.com/podcast, and if you care to support us, we're on Patreon at patreon.com/writegoodbooks. So thanks for listening, and check back next time. We'll see you.
We will see you as you listen to the episode in the future.